I'm standing in a courtroom watching my husband of 42 years have a complete meltdown in front of a judge, screaming that I'm a liar, that I stole from him, that I manipulated everyone. His face is purple. Spit is flying from his mouth. The bailiff has his hand on his weapon. And I'm sitting here, calm, hands folded, watching the man I built a life with completely destroy himself. Because 3 months ago, when he handed me divorce papers at our granddaughter's baptism and told me I'd be living in a studio apartment by Christmas, I signed them without a single tear. He thought I was broken. He had no idea I'd been documenting every single thing he'd done for the past 18 months. And now, right now, his lawyer just stood up and said 5 words that made his whole body go rigid. Your Honor, we request a recess. But the judge isn't giving him one. Because my lawyer just submitted evidence that proves my husband isn't just a cheater. He's a thief. And the woman he thought he was leaving me for? She's about to find out she was never getting the life he promised her. My name is Margaret, I'm 68 years old, and if you stay until the end of this, you'll understand why the man who swore to protect me is now facing criminal charges. Before we get into it, do me a favor and hit that like button. Drop a comment with what state or city you're watching from. I read every single one. And subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you isn't something I ever thought I'd say out loud. I need you to understand something first. Richard and I were married for 42 years. 42 years. I was 26 when we got married, fresh out of graduate school, ready to take on the world. He was 29, already working as a mid-level manager at a manufacturing firm, ambitious, confident, the kind of man who made you feel safe just by walking into a room. We had 3 children. I stayed home with them until the youngest started high school, then I went back to work part-time as a librarian. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that made me powerful or wealthy. Just steady. Reliable. I liked it that way. I typed every single one of Richard's resumes when he was climbing the corporate ladder. I hosted dinners for his bosses, his clients, people whose names I can't even remember now because there were so many of them. I kept the family calendar, made sure the kids got to their doctor appointments, their soccer games, their piano recitals. When his mother got cancer, I was the one who sat with her through chemo while he worked late. I held her hand when she died. I planned the funeral. I wrote the eulogy he delivered. That's who I was. The support system. The foundation. The woman who made sure everything ran smoothly so he could succeed. And he did succeed. By the time he was 60, he was a senior director. Good salary. Great benefits. We paid off the house. We had retirement accounts. We traveled twice a year, nothing extravagant, just cruises and national parks, the kind of trips you take when you've earned a little peace. I thought we were happy. I really did. I thought we were in the part of life where you slow down together, where you enjoy the things you built, where you hold hands and talk about grandkids and what you want your legacy to be. I was wrong. It started small. So small I almost didn't notice. About a year and a half ago, Richard started shredding papers. Not just junk mail. Real documents. Bank statements. Receipts. I'd walk into his office and he'd close the shredder lid like he'd been caught doing something. When I asked what he was shredding, he'd laugh it off. Just clearing out clutter, he'd say. You know how I hate mess. But Richard had never cared about clutter before. Our garage was full of boxes he'd been meaning to go through for a decade. So why was he suddenly so concerned about paper? Then he changed his laptop password. We'd always had open access to each other's devices. Not because we were suspicious, but because we trusted each other. If I needed to check an email or look something up and my phone was dead, I'd use his laptop. If he needed to pull up a recipe I'd saved, he'd use mine. It was normal. But one day I went to look up a flight confirmation and I couldn't log in. When I asked him about it, he said the company required new security protocols. He said it was for work. He said I didn't need to worry about it. But his tone was off. Defensive. Like I'd accused him of something just by asking. Then came the strangest thing. He asked me where my birth certificate was. Out of nowhere. We were having breakfast and he just looked up from his coffee and said, "Do you know where your birth certificate is?" "The original one." I told him it was in the filing cabinet in the basement, same place it had been for 30 years. He nodded and went back to his coffee. Didn't explain why he needed to know. Didn't ask to see it. Just filed the information away. At the time, I thought maybe he was updating our estate documents. But looking back now, I know exactly what he was doing. He was making sure I didn't have easy access to my own identity documents. He was preparing. The last red flag was the bank account. For our entire marriage, Richard's paycheck went into our joint checking account. I paid the bills from that account. I bought groceries from that account. It was our money, the money we used to run our lives. But about 6 months before he served me with divorce papers, he stopped the direct deposit. When I asked him about it, he said the company was switching payroll systems and there was a delay. He said he'd fix it. He handed me cash for groceries. He paid a few bills directly from his phone. He made it seem temporary, like a minor inconvenience. But the direct deposit never came back. And I, like a fool, didn't push it. I trusted him. I thought we were on the same team. I didn't realize it then, but every single one of those small changes was part of a plan. A plan to erase me from our financial life. A plan to make sure that when he finally pulled the trigger, I'd have nothing. The divorce papers came on a Sunday. Our granddaughter's baptism. The whole family was there. Our 3 kids, their spouses, the grandkids, my sister, Richard's brother. It was supposed to be a happy day, one of those rare moments when everyone you love is in the same room and you can just breathe and feel grateful. We were at our daughter Emily's house. I was in the kitchen helping set up the dessert table when Richard walked in, closed the door behind him, and handed me a manila envelope. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, staring at me with this blank expression I'd never seen before. I opened the envelope. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I read the words 3 times before they made sense. "You're divorcing me," I said. It wasn't a question. It was me trying to make my brain catch up to what was happening. "I'm done, Margaret," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. Like he'd practiced this. I've been done for a long time. I want a different life. I want to be happy. And you're not part of that. I felt like the floor had opened up underneath me. "Richard, what are you talking about? We can work on this. If you're unhappy, we can go to counseling, we can." "No." He cut me off. "I don't want to work on it. I want out. And I'm taking what's mine." "What's yours?" I repeated. "The house. The retirement accounts. The cars. I earned it, Margaret. You were a part-time librarian. I built this life. You just lived in it. I want you to understand the cruelty of that moment." This man, who I had supported through every failure, every promotion, every bad day at work, every family crisis, was standing in our daughter's kitchen on the day of our granddaughter's baptism, telling me I didn't deserve the life we'd built together because I hadn't earned enough money. As if raising his children didn't count. As if managing his household didn't count. As if being his partner for 42 years didn't count. I should have screamed at him. I should have thrown something. I should have walked out into that living room and told everyone what he'd just said to me. But I didn't. I just stood there, holding those papers, feeling like I was disappearing. And then I did something I still can't fully explain. I signed them. Right there. I took a pen from the counter and I signed the papers. Richard looked genuinely shocked. "You're signing them? Just like that?" "You clearly want this," I said. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else. "I'm not going to fight you." He actually smiled. Like he'd won. Like I'd just handed him the keys to everything. "I'll have my lawyer contact you about the details," he said. Then he walked out of the kitchen and went back to the party like nothing had happened. I stood there for 10 minutes, staring at my signature on those papers, wondering what I'd just done. Then I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and let myself cry for exactly 5 minutes. When I came out, I fixed my makeup, walked back into the party, and acted like everything was fine. Because if I fell apart in front of my children on their daughter's baptism day, I'd never forgive myself. But something shifted in me in that bathroom. In those 5 minutes. I stopped being the woman who trusted Richard. I stopped being the woman who believed we were a team. I became someone else. Someone colder. Someone who understood that I was in a fight, whether I wanted to be or not. And if I was going to survive this, I needed to stop crying and start thinking. That night, after everyone left, after Richard drove off to God knows where, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened every drawer, every file, every cabinet in that house. I was looking for something. I didn't even know what. Just something that would explain how my husband could look me in the eye and tell me I deserved nothing. And that's when I found it. Hidden in the back of his office closet, behind a box of old tax returns, was a folder. Inside that folder were bank statements. Not from our joint account. From an account I'd never seen before. An account in his name only. And the balance was $180,000. I sat there staring at that number, trying to understand where it came from. Richard made good money, but we weren't wealthy. We lived comfortably, but we weren't the kind of people who had 6 figures sitting in a secret account. I started going through the statements, line by line. Deposits. Lots of them. Small amounts, $2,000 here, $3,500 there, always from something called Meridian Consulting LLC. I'd never heard of Meridian Consulting. I grabbed my laptop and searched for it. Nothing. No website. No business registration. No reviews. It didn't exist. Or it existed just enough to move money. That's when I realized what he'd been doing. He'd been siphoning money out of our life and into a secret account. For how long? I went back through the statements. 2 years. For 2 full years, my husband had been quietly stealing from our future and hiding it where I couldn't see it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the table, going through every piece of paper I could find, and I started to see the whole picture. Richard hadn't just decided to divorce me on a whim. He'd been planning this for years. He'd built an escape route. He'd made sure that when he left, he'd have money, security, freedom, and I'd have nothing. But here's the thing about being married to someone for 42 years. You know how they think. You know their patterns. You know their weaknesses. And Richard's biggest weakness was arrogance. He thought I was too trusting, too naive, too dependent to fight back. He thought that signing those papers meant I'd given up. He had no idea that I'd been keeping records of my own. See, I'm a librarian. Organization is what I do. For years, every Friday, I reconciled our receipts. I matched them to bank statements. I filed them in labeled folders by month and year. I didn't do it because I suspected anything. I did it because I liked having everything in order, because I liked knowing where our money went, because it gave me a sense of control in a life that often felt chaotic. Richard used to tease me about it. "Still playing accountant, Margaret," he'd say. But I kept doing it. And because I kept doing it, I had copies of everything. Every bank statement. Every credit card bill. Every receipt. Every tax return. Going back 15 years. I had proof of every dollar that came into our marriage and every dollar that went out. And now, sitting at that table at 2 in the morning, I realized I had something Richard didn't think I had. I had evidence. The next morning, I called my daughter Emily. I told her I needed help. I didn't tell her everything, not yet, but I told her enough. I told her I'd found something suspicious in your father's financial records and I needed someone who understood money to look at them. Emily works in marketing, but her husband, David, is a CPA. She said she'd ask him. 2 hours later, David called me. He said he'd take a look, no questions asked, but if I found anything illegal, I had to promise I'd go to a lawyer. I promised. David came over that afternoon. I showed him everything. The secret account. The Meridian Consulting deposits. The pattern of withdrawals from our joint account that matched up with deposits into his secret account. The credit card charges for hotels I'd never stayed in, restaurants I'd never been to, jewelry I'd never received. David sat there for 3 hours, going through it all, making notes, asking questions. When he finally looked up at me, his face was pale. "Margaret," he said. "This isn't just a guy hiding money for a divorce. This is fraud. He's been charging personal expenses to corporate accounts and reimbursing himself through a fake company. If his employer finds out, he could lose his job. If the IRS finds out, he could go to prison." "Are you sure?" I asked. "I'm sure enough that you need a lawyer. Today." I didn't realize it then, but that conversation changed everything. Because I wasn't just fighting for a fair divorce anymore. I was sitting on evidence of a crime. And I had a choice to make. I could use it to protect myself, or I could bury it and let Richard get away with everything. I chose to protect myself. I hired a lawyer the next day. Not just any lawyer. I asked around, quietly, carefully, until I found someone with a reputation for winning. Her name was Sharon. She was in her 50s, sharp, no nonsense, the kind of woman who could gut you with a smile. I walked into her office with 3 banker's boxes full of documents and I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, taking notes, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Margaret, your husband is an idiot." "Excuse me?" I said. "He committed fraud, left a paper trail, and thought you were too stupid to find it. That makes him an idiot. And it makes my job very, very easy." Sharon explained what we were going to do. First, we were going to file a counterpetition for divorce before Richard's petition was processed. In our state, whoever files first has certain advantages, and Richard hadn't filed yet. He'd just given me the papers to sign. So technically, I could beat him to the courthouse. Second, we were going to request a freeze on all marital assets, including that secret account, so he couldn't move the money before the divorce was finalized. Third, we were going to submit the evidence of fraud to the court and let the judge decide what to do with it. And fourth, we were going to do all of this quietly, without giving Richard any warning, so he couldn't cover his tracks. "What if he finds out?" I asked. "He won't," Sharon said. "Not until it's too late." I didn't realize it then, but signing those papers at the baptism was the smartest thing I could have done. Because Richard thought I'd given up. He thought he'd won. And for the next 2 weeks, he acted like it. He moved out of the house and into an apartment downtown. He bought a new watch, a Rolex, and posted a picture of it on Facebook with the caption, "New Beginnings." He told his friends I'd agreed to an amicable split. He even brought his mistress to a company dinner. I know because one of Richard's co-workers, a woman named Janet who I'd met at a few holiday parties, sent me a photo. "I thought you should know," the message said. The photo showed Richard at a table, his arm around a woman who looked about 40, blonde, laughing at something he'd said. She was wearing a diamond bracelet I'd never seen before. I stared at that photo for a long time. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream or cry or throw my phone across the room. But instead, I just felt cold. Because I knew something Richard didn't. In 3 days, a process server was going to show up at his office and hand him a very different set of divorce papers. Papers that listed every asset we owned. Papers that included a request to freeze his secret account. Papers that included a subpoena for his employer's financial records. And he wasn't going to see it coming. The day it happened, I was at home, pretending to clean out the garage. Sharon had told me to stay busy, to act normal, to give Richard no reason to think anything had changed. My phone rang at 2:47 p.m. It was Emily. "Mom," she said. Dad just called me. He's losing his mind. He said you filed for divorce. He said you're trying to steal from him. He said you're lying about some account. What's going on? I'll explain later, I said. But I need you to trust me. Everything I'm doing because I have to. There was a pause. Then Emily said, I trust you, Mom. That was all I needed to hear. Richard showed up at the house that night. I'd changed the locks that morning, so he couldn't get in. He pounded on the door, yelling my name, demanding I let him in. I stood on the other side of that door, my hand on my phone, ready to call the police if he didn't leave. But I didn't open it. I didn't say a word. I just let him yell until he got tired. Eventually, he stopped. I heard his car start. I heard him drive away. And I knew the war had officially started. The next few weeks were brutal. Richard's lawyer sent threatening letters. They accused me of hiding assets, of manipulating documents, of trying to destroy Richard's reputation out of spite. Sharon sent letters back, calmly, professionally, attaching copies of the evidence we had. Bank statements. Receipts. Emails Richard had sent to his mistress using his work email. Screenshots of text messages I'd found on an old tablet he thought he'd wiped. Every single thing we sent made Richard's lawyer go quieter. But Richard himself didn't go quiet. He started calling our kids, telling them I was having a breakdown, that I was making things up, that I was trying to ruin him. Our oldest son, Michael, believed him at first. He called me one night, angry, demanding to know why I was doing this to Dad. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just said, Michael, I love you. And when this is over, you'll understand. He hung up on me. That hurt worse than anything Richard had done. But I couldn't force my son to see the truth. I could only hope that eventually, he would. Then came the night Richard tried one last time to intimidate me. He showed up at the house with his mistress. I don't know what he thought that would accomplish. Maybe he wanted me to see them together, to rub it in my face, to make me feel small. They stood on my porch, Richard in a suit, her in a dress that was too tight and too young for a Wednesday night. I opened the door and looked at them. What do you want, Richard? I asked. I want you to stop this insanity, he said. Drop the case. Take a reasonable settlement. Walk away with some dignity. I laughed. I actually laughed. Dignity? You brought your mistress to my house to talk to me about dignity? The woman next to him looked uncomfortable. Good. She should be. You're going to lose, Margaret, Richard said. You have no case. You have no proof. You're embarrassing yourself. I looked him in the eye and said 6 words I'd been waiting to say for weeks. Tell me about Meridian Consulting, Richard. His face changed. It went from smug to pale in about 2 seconds. The woman next to him looked confused. What's Meridian Consulting? She asked. Richard didn't answer. He just stared at me. You should ask him, I said to her. You should ask him where the money for that bracelet came from. You should ask him where the money for that apartment came from. You should ask him what happens when his employer finds out he's been stealing from them. Margaret, shut your mouth, Richard hissed. Or what? I said. You'll divorce me? Too late. He grabbed the woman's arm and pulled her off the porch. They got in the car and drove off. I stood there, watching the taillights disappear, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt powerful. But I didn't realize it then. That moment, that confrontation, was the beginning of the end for Richard. Because the next day, his employer received a subpoena. And 3 days after that, they launched an internal investigation. And 1 week after that, Richard was placed on administrative leave. The mistress left him 2 days later. I know because Janet, the coworker, sent me another message. He's falling apart, it said. Thought you'd want to know. I didn't want to know. But I was glad she told me anyway. The court date finally came. I walked into that courtroom in a navy blue suit I'd bought specifically for this. I wanted to look calm, composed, strong. Sharon was next to me, her briefcase full of documents, her face unreadable. Richard was on the other side of the room with his lawyer, and he looked terrible. He'd lost weight. His suit didn't fit right. His eyes were bloodshot. For a second, just a second, I felt sorry for him. Then I remembered what he'd said to me in Emily's kitchen. I earned it. You just lived in it. And the pity disappeared. The judge was a woman in her 60s, gray hair, sharp eyes, no patience for nonsense. She listened to Richard's lawyer argue that I was trying to steal assets, that I was vindictive, that I had no claim to Richard's retirement account or his earnings. Then she listened to Sharon. And Sharon didn't argue. She just presented evidence. One piece at a time. Calmly. Methodically. Bank statements showing the secret account. Emails showing Richard had used company funds for personal expenses. Receipts showing he'd bought the mistress's bracelet with a corporate credit card. Text messages showing he'd told her he was going to clean Margaret out in the divorce. The judge's expression didn't change as she looked through the documents. But I saw her jaw tighten. I saw her eyebrows go up. I saw her look at Richard like he was something she'd stepped in. Then Sharon called a witness. I didn't know she was going to do this. She hadn't told me. The witness was a woman in her 30s, professional, nervous. She worked in the compliance department at Richard's company. Sharon asked her to explain what she'd found when the company investigated Richard's expense reports. The woman explained that Richard had been submitting false reimbursement requests for 3 years. He'd been charging personal trips as business trips. He'd been expensing dinners with his mistress as client meetings. He'd been using company money to fund his affair and his secret life. The total amount? Over $200,000. Richard's lawyer tried to object. The judge shut him down. I want to hear this, she said. When the witness finished, the judge looked at Richard. Mr. Harrison, she said. Do you have anything to say? Richard stood up. And that's when he lost it. He started yelling. He said I was a liar. He said the witness was lying. He said his company was conspiring against him. He said I'd manipulated everyone. He said I was trying to destroy him. His voice got louder and louder until the bailiff stepped forward and told him to sit down. Richard ignored him. He kept yelling. The bailiff put his hand on his weapon. Richard finally sat down, but he was shaking, his face red, his hands clenched into fists. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I've seen a lot of divorces. I've seen a lot of people lie. I've seen a lot of people try to cheat the system. But this is one of the worst cases I've ever seen. Mr. Harrison, you didn't just betray your wife. You committed fraud. You stole from your employer. You hid assets. And you had the audacity to come into my courtroom and accuse her of doing what you'd been doing all along. She ruled in my favor. On everything. I got the house. I got half of Richard's retirement account, the real one and the secret one. I got alimony. I got my legal fees paid. And Richard was ordered to pay restitution to his employer. The judge also referred his case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Richard's lawyer stood up and asked for a recess. The judge said no. This case is over, she said. Get out of my courtroom. Richard didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the table, his whole body rigid. His lawyer had to physically pull him up and walk him out. I watched him leave, and I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being angry. Tired of spending my energy on a man who hadn't deserved me in the first place. Sharon turned to me and said, You won. I know, I said. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving. The aftermath was complicated. Richard lost his job. The company fired him and filed a civil lawsuit to recover the money he'd stolen. The district attorney did press charges. Richard pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud. He didn't go to prison, but he got probation, community service, and a permanent record. His mistress, the one who'd stood on my porch in that tight dress, tried to contact me once. She sent me a message on Facebook saying she hadn't known he was married when they started seeing each other, that she was sorry, that she'd been lied to. I didn't respond. I didn't care about her story. She wasn't my problem. My kids eventually came around. Michael apologized. He said he should have trusted me from the beginning. Emily cried and said she was proud of me. Our youngest, Sarah, told me I was the strongest person she knew. I didn't feel strong. I felt like I'd been put through a wood chipper and barely survived. But I accepted their words because I needed to hear them. I sold the house 6 months later. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. I bought a small condo near the beach, something that was just mine, something Richard had never touched. I decorated it the way I wanted. I planted a garden on the balcony. I started taking classes, things I'd always wanted to learn but never had time for. Pottery. Watercolor painting. Italian. I traveled. Not on cruises this time, but real trips. I went to Italy by myself and spent 2 weeks wandering through museums and eating pasta and not answering to anyone. I even started dating. Nothing serious, just coffee here and there, dinners with men who were kind and interesting and didn't make me feel like I had to shrink myself to fit into their lives. It was strange at first, being 68 and going on dates, but it was also freeing. I wasn't looking for another husband. I was just looking for companionship. And I found it. One afternoon, about a year after the divorce was finalized, I was in my garden, planting tomatoes, when I heard a car slow down on the street below. I looked up and saw Richard's car. He was driving slowly, staring up at my building. I don't know what he was looking for. Closure? Forgiveness? Some sign that I was miserable without him? I didn't give him any of those things. I just went back to planting my tomatoes. Eventually, he drove away. And I didn't think about him for the rest of the day. Because here's what I learned. Richard thought he could erase me. He thought he could take everything I'd built, everything I'd contributed, everything I was, and just toss it aside like it didn't matter. He thought I was too weak, too dependent, too broken to fight back. But he forgot one thing. I'd spent 42 years holding our life together. I knew where every crack was. I knew where every secret was buried. I knew him better than he knew himself. And when he tried to destroy me, I used that knowledge to protect myself. I didn't win because I was smarter than him. I won because I refused to disappear. I refused to let him write me out of my own story. I signed those papers at the baptism because I knew it would make him confident, careless, sloppy. And it did. He celebrated while I gathered evidence. He posted photos of his new watch while I froze his assets. He brought his mistress to my house while I built a case that destroyed him. Every move he made, I was 3 steps ahead. Not because I'm ruthless. But because I had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. So if you're watching this and you're in a situation where someone is trying to take everything from you, where someone is trying to make you feel small and powerless and invisible, I want you to know something. You are not powerless. You are not small. You are not invisible. You are a person who built a life, who contributed, who mattered. And if you have to fight to make someone see that, then fight. Gather your evidence. Find your allies. Stand your ground. Don't sign anything without understanding it. Don't trust anyone who tells you you're worthless. And don't ever let someone convince you that you deserve nothing. Richard drove past my condo that day because he wanted to see me broken. He wanted to see me suffering. He wanted to confirm that leaving me had been the right choice, that I was nothing without him. But what he saw was me, in my garden, living my life, completely unbothered by his existence. And I think that hurt him more than anything the judge said. Because he realized, in that moment, that I didn't need him. I never had. I'd just been kind enough to let him believe I did. That's my story. That's what happened when my husband of 42 years told me I deserved nothing. I proved him wrong. And I'm still proving him wrong every single day I wake up in my condo, drink my coffee, tend my garden, and live my life exactly the way I want to. If this resonated with you, if you've been through something similar or you know someone who has, share this. Because stories like this matter. They remind us that we're stronger than we think. They remind us that we don't have to accept someone else's version of our worth. They remind us that even when everything falls apart, we can rebuild. Maybe not the same way. Maybe not in the same place. But we can rebuild. And sometimes, the life we build after everything falls apart is better than the life we had before. Because it's ours. Completely, entirely, only ours. And no one can take that away. If you listen to this level, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.